Yep. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our spring grassland webinar. Just a special thanks to everyone who has taken the time to log in here this morning. We've got a huge amount of both merchants and independent and Teagasc advisors who have logged on today, so we're very grateful for you all taking the time to tune in. Just to say, I'm going to record this webinar today, so the link will be available for people. We'll send that link out afterwards if anyone needs to recheck anything, or if somebody has missed today, they can pass it on and send it to them. First of all, I'm going to cover weed control in established grassland. Then I'm going to move on to weed control in new sown leys. I will also mention a little bit about forefront and the stewardship that's involved around that. If you have any questions during the talk, please type them into the questions and answers tab on the Zoom. We will deal with questions after each section, and we'll try and get through as many as we can as well. There is IASIS points available, and we will be forwarding on the list of those who wish to get the IASIS onto Anne Williams in IASIS. So I'll just begin to share the screen and we'll kick off. Okay. So I'm going to run through, as I say, the different weeds, docks, nettles, thistles. But first of all, we're going to talk about the range of products which Corteva AgroScience do. So they have Thistlex, as you're all familiar with, for thistles. They also do Grassland Pro, which is widely used for knapsack applications. There's Dockstar Pro, which is very good at killing docks, especially in silage ground, but also in grazing ground. They also have Forefront T, which is probably the most broadest spectrum and best weed killer on the market for docks, thistles, nettles, buttercups, dandelions, ragwort. It covers nearly all the weeds, broadleaf weeds out there, except, of course, rushes. We also have Envy, which is really good at controlling chickweed, docks, dandelions, buttercups as well, and it can be used in new sown leys. And then we also have Pasture Trio, probably the biggest product now available for use in new sown leys, but also can be used in established grassland. I suppose, first of all, we wonder, when do you go and spray? Or how bad does the situation have to get before a farmer actually decides he has to go and spray for docks? Does it really have to get this bad before a guy realizes that it needs to be sprayed? It's very important, I suppose, to understand the level of dock infestation you have. You know, whether that's 10%, 20%, or 30%, because that's important, because the work has been done by Teagasc, which has shown that your level of infestation directly affects the amount of grass that's grown. So work done by Tim O'Donovan down in Kildalton a number of years ago. He had a wide range of plots, and he found from 2 cuts of silage that you're getting approximately 11 tons of dry matter per hectare from those plots. Okay, so Tim would have harvested all these plots. He would have measured the amount of grass and the amount of docks that were in these plots and separated them out. And each of the dots on this chart represent each individual plot and what was weighed. So you can see where the level of docks increased on the bottom there, where you're getting maybe up to 5 tons of docks per hectare. That had a direct effect on the level of grass. So you're only getting 6 tons of grass per hectare. You were still getting 11 tons of dry matter from the 2 cuts of silage. However, the docks were directly taking away from the level of grass. And there was actually one plot down there which had 11 tons of dry matter of docks and only 1 ton of grass. Generally, your grass and your ground will grow only a specific or certain amount of dry matter a year. So if weeds grow like docks and buttercups and other weeds, they're directly going to take away from grass. So it's important to eliminate those weeds especially early in the season, and allow grass to grow and to maximize your amount of silage yield and also the quality. And to put approximate figures on that, you're looking at a 10% yield loss costing in the region of €160 a hectare, which is about €70 an acre. So it more than covers the cost of both the spray and the cost of doing the application as well. And that's only a small level of infestation, 10%. And in many cases, it could be 20 or 30% infestation of weeds. Or a simpler way of putting it is one bale in every 10, which would be worth about €20–25 an acre. So first of all, I'm going to cover weed control on docks in established grassland. There's two main types of docks. You have the broadleaf dock, which has this wide and broad leaf, but you also have this curly leaf dock or narrow leaf dock. This dock leaf is much narrower, as the name says, and it's much more difficult to get spray onto this leaf in order to get down and kill out the taproot. And it is much more difficult to control the narrow leaf dock. Docks have a very large taproot that can be up to 1 meter deep. So this is really important when you're trying to choose a product to get down there to kill out that root. It's important to use a systemic herbicide like the ingredients in Dockstar and Forefront T, because these will help to get down and kill out that root. Docks produce thousands of seeds. One large mature dock can produce up to 60,000 seeds in a year. And those dock seeds can survive for 50 to 80 years in the soil. So this becomes an issue when you go to reseed, when you disturb the soil. A lot of these dock seeds can then get the opportunity to germinate and can become a problem. Docks prefer high fertility, especially high K and potash. So generally you tend to have large amount of docks in areas where lots of slurry or farmyard manure are being applied. Generally, docks do not survive pit silage. Well-preserved, low pH silage, where the pH gets down to low 4 or 4.2, 4.3. In those situations, dock seeds will not survive if they're in the pit for over 2 to 3 months. They generally don't survive either passing through the rumen of the animal. However, they can survive in bale silage, especially haylage, or poorly preserved silage where the pH does not drop. So there is a possibility that dock seeds can survive there. Docks love open swards. So if you get wet ground or wet areas and it gets poached, all those dock seeds that are in the ground, they get the opportunity to germinate then. The picture on the right-hand side there, you can see where docks were sprayed off. There was a large infestation of docks, and however, it smothered out the grass and there's lots of bare ground afterwards. When that gets poached or disturbed by animals, it allows the opportunity for those dock seeds to germinate again. And that's why in lots of situations, the split dose of Dockstar Pro works very well, because you're coming back to hit it a second time to hit those little seedling docks that are coming through several weeks later. Timing of the year, whether it's the spring, summer or autumn, you know, a lot of people ask which is the best time of the year to spray. Really, time of the year does not make a huge amount of difference. What's more important is the timing of the dock. Okay, so it's really important to hit it when there's plenty of leaf there. You don't want to go too early when there's only 2 or 3 leaves picking up, because remember, you want to get enough chemical onto that leaf in order to get down to kill out that root. You also want to avoid spraying later on when the seed head starts to appear, because what tends to happen is lots of the nutrients go up the plant to producing seeds, and less of the chemical is brought down to kill out that root. You still will get good levels of control and it'll kill out the docks that are there. However, you will get more regrowth later on in the season. So ideally, you want to spray a dock when it's 8 to 10 inches higher across, good, green, healthy leaves to maximize the amount of chemical and spray that gets onto the leaf to get down to kill out the root. You get this green beetle also in lots of situations, and that tends to eat away the leaf. A small amount of damage is okay. However, if they've totally eaten away the leaf, you're going to get very little chemical into the plant down to kill out that root. So avoid those situations. And you also want to avoid frost damage. So you can, even into April time, get some late frosts. What tends to happen is the leaves turn purple. And if you don't have the green leaf there, you're going to get reduced amount of chemical into the plant down to kill out that root. So you avoid that situation. Wait maybe a week to 10 days later for a couple of new leaves to come out, and then spray again. Spray at that time. It's important to use plenty of water to ensure good coverage. So you're talking in the minimum 200 to 400 litres per hectare. However, with DocStar Pro, we recommend a minimum of 300 litres per hectare. And this is because you can have lots of coverage, from grass and shading from grass. And you've got this large, big leaf that you want to get good coverage of. Now, we have done some work over the last number of years where we've looked at the use of low drift nozzles, air inclusion nozzles, or the Amistar nozzle, as plenty of people would know it as. And these low drift nozzles tend to reduce the amount of drift. They give a slightly larger, more even droplet size, which then gives better coverage. And you can see on this picture, the nozzles closest to you in the picture are the low drift nozzles, where on the far side of the boom, they have the standard flat fan nozzles, and you can see plenty of drift there. And in these situations, we can recommend the use of 200 litres of water per hectare with these air inclusion nozzles. They don't cost a huge amount, €3 or €4 each, and most grassland farmers will only need 12. So you're looking at less than €100 to kit out your sprayer. And that'll also allow you to do more tanks and less fills were needed when you're actually spraying. When you spray any of the Corteva range of products, whether it's DocStar or Forefront, generally you just leave 7 days afterwards before you allow the animals back in to graze. However, if you're cutting hay or silage, we like to leave it longer, minimum 3 to 4 weeks. And the reason that is to give the chemical time to get onto the plant and to get down and kill out the root. You will later on in the springtime get plenty of calls where a farmer has applied DocStar Pro and he wants to cut the silage 7 days later. There's not an issue in terms of the quality of the silage or any effect. However, you will get more regrowth later on. So really you want to be targeting your DocStar Pro in the silage ground over the next 3 to 4 weeks. In April is the best time. Kill out the weed and allow the grass to grow in its place. And look, it does work. We've done demonstrations over the last number of years. This one down in County Laois, big photograph taken in around the 15th of April. The farmer went out, sprayed with DocStar Pro, and you can see 4 weeks later that lovely clean field, docks gone, and you would much prefer to be bringing this into your pit than the previous picture with all those docks. Also looked at Forefront Tea, this highly infested field in Tipperary. Not alone had it got docks, there was also buttercups, ragworts, dandelions, a wide range of weeds in it. This picture was taken 2 weeks after application. You can already see the docks and weeds well taken care of. 6 to 8 months later, you can see it's the same field, nice clean field. And even into the following year, 12 months later, Forefront Tea is probably given the best level of control 12 to 24 months after application. There's two main products we have, I suppose, for controlling docks in grassland. The first one will be DocStar Pro. It contains 2 active ingredients, peroxypar and triclopyr. But it's the combination of these 2 ingredients which is getting down to kill out that root. Peroxypar does work quite well on its own at killing docks, but in order to get the root kill, you do need a combination of peroxypar and triclopyr to get down there and kill out that root. DocStar Pro, generally full rate is 2 litres per hectare, but in lots of situations it's used at 1 litre per hectare. Again, remember water volume, you do need a minimum of 300 litres per hectare unless you're using those low drift or Amistar nozzles. It's rain fast in 2 hours. And like we said, 7-day interval before you allow livestock back in. 4-Front-T, probably the Rolls Royce in terms of dock control in grazing paddocks. It contains 2 ingredients again, triclopyr and also aminoperlide, which is not available in any other herbicide for the grassland market. It's available in a 2-litre pack. Generally, we go out at the full rate, and in most situations, you don't reduce the rate. You do it once, do it right, and you get very good long-term kill, root kill from the product. Water volume is not as critical with 4-Front-T, but obviously if you have large weeds and large covers of grass, you do like to increase the water volume to 250 to 300 litres per hectare. It's rain fast in 1 hour, and then again, a 7-day stock withdrawal. Other products like Envy and Pasture Trio will also give good levels of control of docks and season-long control, as well as other weeds which they control. Thistles, just a couple of slides on thistles. There's 2 main types of thistles. You have the creeping thistle and also the buck thistle or the spear thistle. The creeping thistle is the one that generally grows in clumps within a field, and it would spread out from that. It's connected underground by these rhizomes underneath the ground, and they're interconnected. So that's why it's very important to use a systemic herbicide which gets down and kills out that root. The buck thistle or the spear thistle grows generally as a single plant and has a large taproot. It's a biannual plant, so in the first year it'll stay as a rosette, and then it overwinters, and the following year then it'll produce this seed head with a purple flower. Although it grows as a single plant, it can be quite widespread throughout the field. We've been getting a lot of calls over the last 2 or 3 years on buck thistle or spear thistle in reseeded ground. So generally it would appear in reseeded ground, but it wouldn't have too much of a problem in the first year, but then generally it's the second year afterwards that it tends to seed out and be a problem. Thistles again should be 8 to 10 inches higher across when being sprayed. And we have a number of products that control thistles, but obviously Thistlex, as the name says, is the best product there. There's 2 ingredients, triclopyr, but it's this ingredient, clopyralid, which gives you that good systemic action at killing out the roots of the thistles. Comes in a 2-litre pack. It's 1 litre per hectare, or sorry, comes in a 1 litre pack. It's 1 litre per hectare and does 1 hectare. Also, 4-Front-T does good levels of control of thistles, along with Pasture Trio. And then if you're spot spraying thistles, Grassland Pro does quite a good job. Nettles. Again, it's very important to target them early when they're about 12 inches high, and don't allow them maybe get 2 to 3 foot, which happens in a lot of situations. Can get it in clumps throughout a field. Tends to be worse in areas where there's sheep are grazing tight. The nettles tend to get a grip. So for field applications of nettles, 4-Front-T will do a really good job. It's the ingredient triclopyr that's killing the nettles, and 4-Front-T will give you almost 500 grams per hectare. So it does a really good job at killing out nettles. For spot treatment, it's Grassland Pro is the ideal product for spot treating nettles. Some other common grassland weeds. Dandelions will be the one that you start to see over the next couple of weeks. First, they produce this yellow flower, and then a couple of weeks later, they'll seed out and produce a white flower, and the seeds will start to blow across the ground. We're very lucky in that a large number, or nearly all the products from the Corteva range will give good levels of control with dandelion. So whether it's 4-Front-T, Dockstar, or Envy or Pasture Trio, they'll all give good levels of control of dandelions. Creeping buttercup can be a problem, especially in wet ground, where it creeps along the ground, or if you get a lot of poaching over the winter time, it can germinate and produce a big mat of buttercup over the ground. There's two types of buttercup. You have the creeping buttercup, but you also have this meadow buttercup. And this is slightly different in that the leaves are quite narrow compared to the creeping buttercup, and it's more difficult to control the meadow buttercup. And when it starts to flower, it grows up, and it's very difficult to get the spray onto the leaves. 4-Front-T is probably the best product to give in long-term control of buttercup, but also Envy and Pasture Trio, when used at the full rate or even a 3/4 rate, will do a very good job at killing buttercups. A lot of the time, controlling buttercups, a lot of the farmers won't come to you till there's a problem or they're in flower, but it is important to try and get them early in the season. In this situation, some of them were sprayed when they were starting, flower buds were starting to form, and these were sprayed with Pasture Trio. You can see that it did do quite a good job. However, you are going to get some regrowth after this situation. And in this particular situation with Pasture Trio used in County Kildare, you can see where it was sprayed. Some of the weeds were quite large, but it did quite a good job on them and works quite well. So Pasture Trio or Envy will be an ideal product of choice in this situation, especially where you're going to be cutting hay or silage afterwards. Chickweed can also be a problem in established grassland. You have two types of chickweed. You have the common chickweed, which grows in a mat across the ground. But we've also seen over the last number of years a lot more of this mouse ear chickweed. It tends to grow as a single stem with 1 or 2 side shoots off it, produces a white flower, but it does have these little hairs on the leaf, which make it more difficult for the chemical to penetrate into the cuticle of the leaf. So that's where the products like Envy and Pasture Trio, their oil-based formulation allows the chemical to get down through the droplets, to get down through them hairs of the leaf into the cuticle. Docstar Pro will do quite a good job on chickweed too. However, if you're targeting lots of mouse ear chickweed, it's the only time that we recommend to use an adjuvant with Docstar Pro in that situation. But look, in many situations, there'll be a wide range of weeds, dandelions, thistles, docks. So there's different choices. We've got Envy, which control a wide range of weeds, dandelions, docks, chickweed, buttercups. It'll do a wide range of weeds. Pasture Trio will do the same weeds along with thistles. And then 4-Front-T is the most broadest spectrum of them all. As I mentioned at the start, it'll control nearly all the broadleaf weeds, including ragwort, everything except the rush. And look, you want to be avoiding situations like this where farmers are going out cutting their silage with docks and thistles and bringing this into the pit. Okay, if I have any questions there, I'll take them now in terms of weed control in established grasslands. So I have a couple here just on my other monitor. Someone is asking, do all dock killers control the narrow or curly leaf dock? A lot of them found it more difficult to control it. We're lucky that both Docstar and 4-Front-T will control both species. However, some of the clover-safe dock killers are poorer on the narrow leaf dock. So just to be aware of that, and it tends to be a bigger problem where clover is an issue. Someone's asking, any issues with 4-Front-T or Docstar affecting or stunting the grass growth on silage ground? But generally, Docstar Pro is the product of choice for silage ground. It would have no effect on the grass at all. Even at double the rate, which would be 4 litres a hectare where it's been tested, it's shown to have very little effect on the growth. In most situations, it's generally used at half rate, a litre per hectare, which is one pack doing 5 acres. It will have absolutely no effect. So what's happening now is lots of farmers are going out, they're putting out their fertilizer, probably in the last week or so, or in this coming week. You generally wait maybe 7 days later, at least 7 days if they've harrowed or rolled the field, and then you target the docks in that silage ground in the next week or 10 days. And then there's plenty of time in order for the docks to be eliminated before he cuts the silage. Generally with 4-front-T, it's not recommended for use in silage ground, okay? Now 4-front, as the question asked, will have no effect on the grass. However, you do need to watch it in silage ground, and I have 1 or 2 slides I'll show you here just in terms of the stewardship of 4-front-T, okay? On each of the pack of 4-front, there's this little concertina, and if the farmer pulls it off, he'll see all these little charts. So we don't recommend the use of 4-front on silage ground, and the reason for that is has no effect on the silage whatsoever, and if you cut the silage and then sile it in the pit, has no effect at all. However, when the animals eat it, the ingredient in 4-front-T passes through the animal and ends up in the manure. And it's what happens, that manure afterwards, that's the problem. And if that manure, that slurry or farmyard manure is put onto a field where you try to grow potato crops or a vegetable crop, even fodder beet, the ingredient can affect that crop afterwards. So if you do have the situation where a farmer sprays a paddock with 4-front-T, and then it gets too strong and he has to make silage afterwards, it's very important that that silage stays on his own farm, number one. And secondly, that any subsequent slurry or manure generated from the eating of that silage remains in the farm and goes back out on grassland. Then there's no issue whatsoever. The reason the horse and not to be used on ground grazed by horse, it has no effect on the horse whatsoever. However, the horse can be brought into the stable at night, can generate manure in the stable. That's put into a dung heap. And if that's composted and then used around the garden, it can affect the plants, especially roses or vegetables that grow. And we would have a number of situations every year where this has happened, that either manure from horses or from cattle is used in the vegetable patch, and it does have an effect. There's no terms of effect on the safety of that food that's produced, but it does affect the growth of it. So we don't recommend the use of 4-front-T in silage ground, and absolutely never use 4-front-T where you're making hay, because in lots of situations, hay gets exported off the farm and then it's unknown what happens to that manure that's generated afterwards. There's plenty of other options for use in hay ground, like Pasture, Trio, and Envy. Have you currently any clover safe products effective against stocks, or any products coming in the future? Corteva AgriScience are working on a clover safe product, but it is going to take time. We did think we would have it available this year, but it won't be available for at least 2 years. So there is hope for new clover safe products. There is work being done in developing them, but unfortunately, they're going to be at least 2 years away. Is late March too early to spray? What's the size? What decides is a temperature? Well, look, we're at the end of March now. Is it too early to spray weeds now? No, it's not. It's very mild at the moment, and currently you could spray weeds. What decides it really is, obviously you want good temperatures. You don't want to be spraying when it's cold and harsh, but it is quite mild at the moment. Also is the weed size. Make sure that the weeds are there. So for weeds like docks, ensure that they're green and healthy and don't have any frost damage. For buttercups, yes, they would be there now, and dandelions, you certainly could spray them. Also chickweed, especially overwintered chickweed, that certainly could be sprayed with either Envy or Pasture Trio in these couple of weeks. They work better actually in that cooler conditions than straight Feroxipar, so they would be an ideal product of choice there. The only one to watch really would be ragwort and using 4-front-T. It is important that ragwort is actively grown when a herbicide is applied, whether that be 2,4-D or 4-front-T. You do need warm conditions. So if soil temperatures are below 9 degrees and you don't have active growth, the plant does not wake up and it just is not active and it won't take in the chemical and it just won't kill it. So you do need to watch. So generally, once you get into April time, the first couple of weeks in April would be ideal for killing ragwort. And you don't want to let the ragwort get too strong. Don't wait till May, because when it gets too strong, it takes a long time for that ragwort to die. There's a couple of questions on reseed, but I'll take them in a couple of minutes. Someone is asking, can you mix Grassland and 4-Front-T? Yeah, look, you could mix them, but I couldn't see any reason why you should. 4-Front-T will do every weed that Grassland Pro does. Now, Grassland Pro is the product of choice for use in knapsack applications. 4-Front-T is the product of choice for field applications. So you would be using one in a knapsack and the other in a sprayer. So for that reason, you probably wouldn't mix them. But there wouldn't be any, in terms of the weeds, there wouldn't be any reason to mix them at all. Someone is asking about 4-Front-T. We covered that there. They're asking, when can you cut silage after you use 4-Front-T, or how many seasons did you wait? But generally, if you want to spray 4-Front-T in silage ground, the recommendation is to wait till after you cut your silage. So after first cut silage in the summertime, you can certainly work away, use 4-Front-T there. You can graze away from the ear, for the year, no problem at all. And then the following year, if you do make silage the following year, you do still have to wait and use that silage, or sorry, you'd still have to keep that silage on your own farm and make sure that the manure that's generated from it stays on the farm. The risk is much lower because a lot of the grass has been grazed away, but there still is a small risk of even the following season that having an effect on it. If you use 4-Front-T in a field, like you spray field X today, you cannot grow a vegetable crop in that field the following year. That's a following crop issue, so you do need to be careful there. If a farmer uses 4-Front-T, that he doesn't set that field for potatoes the following year. Another question on 4-Front-T. How long after spraying 4-Front-T can you incorporate clover? Unfortunately, all of the products that Corteva have will kill clover. And if you want to incorporate clover afterwards, you do need to wait a minimum of 3 months from the time you spray till the time you incorporate clover afterwards. There has been situations where people have done it after 6 weeks or 2 months and got away with it. However, you do need to be very careful. The label states to wait 3 months, and it's because there would be some residual activity, residual effect from the spray. So you do want to allow that to be eliminated. So the more you can graze and get away that grass, the better. And that just allows time for the clover then to get established then after that. What are the buffer zones required for these products? All the grassland sprays have a 5-meter buffer zone in them when you're using standard flat fan nozzles. We mentioned earlier the use of a low drift nozzle, like an Amistar nozzle. By using those low drift nozzles, that allows you bring that buffer zone into 1 meter. So there's an added advantage for getting a set of those nozzles for your grassland sprayer. Now, most farmers that would have been in reps or those schemes in the past would have their electric fences and fences 1 meter away from the top of a water course. So there wouldn't be an issue then. They could spray right up to the edge of the water course. Now, it's water courses that you're keeping away from, not hedges. You can spray the products up and close to a hedge. There's no issue there whatsoever. It's from the top of the bank of the water course is where you need to be careful. Product of choice for hogweed. Yes, hogweed is one that will certainly be there now and starting to grow. You'll also see cow parsley, certainly on the sides of the roads and stuff. Cow parsley is the one that produces that white leaf as well. Grassland Pro, the ingredient triclobar, is quite good on both hogweed and cow parsley. So for spot applications, Grassland Pro is the product of choice. But for field applications, it would be 4-Front-T. That would be the product of choice. Look, I'll take a few more of them questions at the end. I can come back to it. I'll move on to a new sown leys. We'll talk a little bit about new sown leys for the next 10 minutes or so. Okay, weed control and use sown leys. First of all, I'm going to show you a little video, so hopefully this plays and I'll do a little bit of talking over it. Chickweed can be a big problem in new sown leys. So this was a demonstration or a demo we did down in Carlow, reseed back in July 2019. And we got the farmer to leave an untreated spit in the middle of the field. Okay, so you can see here lots of weeds, especially chickweed, starting to grow. From this aerial view, you can see there's a couple of patches or brown patches in the field. This is where the chickweed totally smothered out the grass even before we got to spray it in September time, which is about 3 months after the application or after reseeding. The weeds got a little bit big and smothered out the grass. In this particular field, not alone chickweed was a problem. He also had a problem with docks, a small number of soft weeds, and there was also some stinging nettle in it as well. So in this case, Envy was the product of choice that we used here. He didn't have any thistles in the field. And you can see he did quite a good job. That was the field before it was sprayed, just at the time of spraying. So you can see there was quite a good bit of chickweed, and as you saw from the aerial view, it still got too large where it actually smothered out the seedlings. So it's important to get in early to prevent this from happening. Now, these pictures were taken then the following springtime, around April time, and you can see in the untreated patch in the middle where the chickweed wasn't sprayed, that it totally smothered out the seedling grasses. And that now has allowed other weeds like docks and thistles and other weeds to come and get established in that field. So when that's going to be grazed and the ground gets disturbed, those weeds get in. So it's really important to get in early, about 6 or 8 weeks after you sow, to eliminate weeds like chickweed. You have 2 types of chickweed. In that case, it was the common chickweed that caused the damage. Mouse-eared chickweed, while it won't smother out the grass seedlings, it can be quite invasive, certainly after a new sown ley. And we would have seen a lot after the dry summer of 2018, where lots of mouse-eared chickweed. And again, this year, we're seeing lots of mouse-eared chickweed emerging over the winter time. But not alone chickweed, you want to prevent docks from getting established, because that's the one that will cause the long-term damage. So again, we mentioned earlier work carried out by Tim O'Donovan when he was in Chagas down in Kildalton. It was an autumn reseeded in 2009, and then the field was sprayed the following springtime. So very like we have now, there could have been a number of reseeded last autumn. You're wondering, will you get in and spray them now? So he got in and sprayed this particular plot. At the time, it was Docstar Pro because it was cleared for use in new sown leys. But that'd be quite similar to using Pastor Trio now, systemic herbicide. Got in, killed out them roots before they were established. And this picture was taken 5 years after the application. And you can still see no docks appearing in that ground. There's 2 cuts of silage, and then it's grazed by cattle after that as well. And the rest of the field, you can see a large amount of docks. So and this is the aerial view. You can see the untreated spot has lots of docks in it, and the treated area has very few docks, 1 or 2. You're getting over 90–95% control 5 years after application. And you ask, why is that? Well, it's because you're targeting seedling docks. You're targeting a small dock with a small root structure. The dock here with the root structure is taken from a dock which is 2 years old, and already you can see the root is almost 10–12 inches and starting to get thick. And we saw by the earlier photos that if you leave that 2, 3, 4 years, that root can grow up to 1 meter deep, and it's much, much more difficult to eliminate it at that stage. So in a reseed situation, you'll get all these seedling docks coming, which you can see there, the little cotyledon leaf coming, but you'll also get these bigger leaves. And what this is docks growing from old roots, or the crowns of roots, which were in the field before it was sprayed off. They get chopped up and they can then be viable and produce ducks. It's more difficult to control them, and lots of the clover safe products that were on the market before were not able to kill the ducks coming from that route. So that's why it's important to use a systemic product like Envy or Pastor Trio to kill out that root early on. Thistles can also be a problem. You can see here is seedling thistle from the creeping thistle. But you can also see here, these are quite larger thistles that are starting to emerge. And when we dug it up, you can see these are growing from root structures. Fragments of that root was chopped up and, at the time of sowing, and all those little root structures are still viable, and they're starting to grow this true leaf or established thistle straight away. And you can see the difference of the two plants. You can see the one on the right hand side. You see the little cotyledon leaf growing here. This is one grown from seed, which is easily killed, but this one is more difficult to kill. Now, Pastor Trio, we're lucky enough, has the thiperlid in it and will give a good level of control of thistles. However, if these established ones get quite large and allowed to grow maybe to 6 inches, it will be difficult for Pastor Trio to kill it out at the 1 litre per hectare rate. You'll have to wait till 12 months later and target it with Pastor Trio at the higher rate or switch to Thistlex. So it just goes to the importance of getting in early to eliminate those weeds. So again, this is another example of a field which was reseeded in the summer of 2017. Quite a large infestation of docks. They were let get quite big. You'd be wondering, is it worth even keeping a field like this? However, that was sprayed with Pastor Trio. And look, you can see the picture taken a number of weeks later that it gave very good levels of control. Look, Pastor Trio is probably the product of choice now for use in new sown leys. The rate is 1 litre per hectare. You can use it when the grass is quite small from the 3-leaf stage. So you're talking maybe 6 to 8 weeks after you reseed. So really, when a farmer is walking out from your co-op with the grass seed, he should be bringing the Pastor Trio and the weed herbicide with him to kill out those weeds afterwards. Because in the majority of situations, weeds will grow when you disturb the soil. So it comes in a 3-litre pack and it does 7.5 acres. And it's rain fast within 2 hours. Unfortunately, Pastor Trio will kill the clover. And there's nothing you can do, unfortunately, in that situation. Especially if you have thistles, there's no clover safe product on the market. The only products that were on the market in the past were Legimax DB and Clovamax. Now there is talk of those getting an emergency approval for this year for use in clover safe products. And if that comes true, that'll be widely welcomed. However, remember that they will only kill docks coming from seed. They won't kill the established docks. And unfortunately, they won't kill chickweed. So if you have a bad situation of chickweed and established docks, you're going to have to switch to Pastor Trio and then come and incorporate the clover afterwards. And like the question that was mentioned earlier, you need to wait 3 months from the time you apply Pastor Trio to the time you incorporate clover afterwards. Okay, I can take a few questions here on new sown leys, or I'll answer some of the other ones on the established weeds as well. Will chickweed need to be sprayed, or will grazing before going to seed remove it as it is an annual weed? Look, lots of the annual weeds like fat hen or red dead nettle or weeds like that, if you can top them or graze them before they get too well established, they will be killed and they will be died and they'll die off. However, chickweed is slightly more difficult. And even when you top chickweed, whether it be the perennial, whether it be the common chickweed or the mouse-ear chickweed, it still can come back. And we found in situations that lots of animals where they're grazing fields that have lots of chickweed in it, they won't actually graze out the chickweed. It's not very palatable. So it is important to get in early. Again, you want to be targeting that weed when it's quite small, maybe only 1 inch or 2 inches, and eliminate the chickweed at that stage. And that's where you're going to have to come in with Pastor Trio or Envy. There's a question here. A new reseed sprayed last autumn that didn't get its post-emergent spray yet. What can be used this spring? Again, these fields may not have been grazed, so there's probably a good cover of grass in it. It depends on what weeds are there. Look, the two products that can be used is Envy and Pastor Trio. A new sown ley is currently classified as a grass that's less than 1 year old. So in that situation, if it was sowed last autumn, you cannot use Dockstar or Forefront T in that field, okay? As they have no effect on the grass, but it's just the way it's classified, less than 1 year old, okay? So your only option really is Pastor Trio or Envy. And really Pastor Trio is probably the product of choice because it's more broad spectrum. There could be some thistles in that field. You'd use it at 1 litre per hectare, and it'll do your docks, your thistles, your chickweed, and lots of the broadleaf weeds. Leave it 7 days and then get in and graze it afterwards. Another question there, how soon after spraying with Dockstar can you oversow with grass or clover? We mentioned the clover, it's 3 months. However, the grass is sooner. You can oversow or stitch in grass 6 weeks after the application of Dockstar Pro. I suppose, the question here, how many years control with Dockstar or Forefront T will you get? I'm presuming you're talking about ducks, controlling ducks. Look, generally, if you're using Dockstar at the litre per hectare, you're probably looking at 1 season long control. It's very good value at the litre. That's the half rate, costing about €16 an acre to the farmer, including VAT. Give you good level of control. Where you use it and you have number of ducks coming back and guys want to eliminate them for longer term, we always recommend to go in with the split application. For 2 reasons. One is you'll have that shading effect that we talked about earlier, and if there's large open areas, new seedling ducks may come back in. So it's important to eliminate them and give the grass time to cover up over that area. But also we find with Dockstar Pro that if you have a large taproot, one of those big taproots, you can get a little side shoot running off from the top of the crown, where some of the root will not have been totally killed out. You get a little leaf, 1 or 2 leaves starting to come. But if you can hit that leaf within 12 months again and hit that plant the second time, it'll tend to totally kill out that root. So you get better long-term control then, following on from that, maybe two years of dock-free after the application of the split dose. With Forefront T, we do tend to find better long-term control. The ingredient aminopyrrolide is really good and fast-acting at getting down to kill out that root. And we found situations where, even in reasonably bad situations of docks, we were getting good levels of control 2 to 3 years afterwards. You'll never totally eliminate all the docks. And then you'll also get the field where the guy has tried everything beforehand. He's tried Eagle, he's tried MCPAs, he's tried dicambas, and he's tried all the products. And then he comes and hits it with Forefront T. If you have a bad infestation of docks, even one application of Forefront T won't give you 100% control after the first year, you know, so you do have to watch that. But we have lots of evidence to show that it is giving you better long-term control. It costs a lot more. You're up maybe at 36, 37, 38 euro an acre. However, if you include the cost of spraying, okay, you're up to maybe 50 euro an acre. And you switch that with maybe using the cheaper Feroxipar products. Every year you'd have to use those. You're probably looking at maybe 20 to 22 euro an acre for Feroxipar, including the cost of spraying. So if you've used Feroxipar every year, suddenly after 2 or 3 years, it's certainly paid to eliminate the docks with the Forefront T in the first place. Any issues with milking cows and using Forefront T? There's no issues whatsoever. The product is really, really safe for the use of, for using it in dairy situation. And I know people are often worried about the issues with the manure. When the manure had been tested, lots of other products even turn up on the manure. Whether you use MCPA or you use Feroxipar or different products, loads of those ingredients turn up in the manure after the application. However, the fact that the 4-Front-T is so strong and potent at killing out weeds and broadleaf weeds, it has that effect. Even a small amount can still have an effect on killing those vegetable crops. And that's where the issue is. Very safe and no issue there whatsoever. Someone is asking here, if I have mature ducks in pasture and you're going to burn them off with glyphosate, how long do you have to leave before spraying, or sorry, how long do you have to leave between spraying and ploughing? That would be a very common question. So you go in with your Roundup Bioactive, you spray off the grass. Lots of people go in 7 days later and then plough up that grass. And look, 7 to 10 days is probably sufficient for eliminating lots of the grass weeds. However, for eliminating a perennial weed like docks, it does take longer for the Roundup to get down and kill out that root. And it can take up to 3 weeks. However, lots of people will not wait the time. And that's where you have the issue then when you plough or you go in and you disc, you get all these chopped up roots and chopped up crowns, and they're still viable if you plough 7 to 10 days afterwards. That's why you need to go in with the stronger products like Pastor Trio to eliminate those root fragments and those docks growing from the root fragments. And look, it will eliminate them and kill them out. And then if you want to put clover in, you can go and incorporate your clover after that. And I suppose another question which is quite similar, is the root structure of docks and thistles killed out by the Roundup? Yes, they will be killed out if you leave it long enough. And that's the problem. People don't have the time to leave it then 3 weeks to kill it out. So even Roundup will get down and kill out your creeping thistle, but if it's not given the time to get down to kill out the root, when you plough it or disc up that ground 10 days later, that's where those roots will be viable. Okay? So ideally give it longer, but I know that's not practical in every situation. How temperature dependent is Pastor Trio? It's less temperature dependent than Feroxipar when you're after chickweed. So yes, you could use it now at this time of the year. Even if it got a little bit cooler at the weekend, there'd be no problem at all. You can use Pastor Trio down to 6 or 7 degrees Celsius, no problem. Spray it during the day. Midday is probably a good time to spray it at this time of the year. For mouse ear chickweed control, do you need to include an adjuvant with Envy or Pastor Trio? And that's what I was mentioning earlier, the use when you're targeting mouse ear chickweed. It does have those little hairs on the leaf. However, the formulation in Envy and Pastor Trio does not require an adjuvant. They're oil-based formulations, and you don't need an adjuvant when you're included when you're using those. However, if you're using either straight Feroxipar or you're using Docstar Pro, that's the only time we recommend to use an adjuvant, when you're targeting mouse ear chickweed in those situations. Someone's asking, a lot of reseeds tend to be done in the last couple of weeks of August or September. Can you use Pastor Trio in those situations? Pastor Trio can be used up till the end of August in a reseed, and that's to do with the clypearla, the ingredient that's in it. So there is an earlier cut off with Pastor Trio in reseeds. However, you can use Envy right up till the 1st of November in that situation. Okay, so you'd switch to Envy. So if you didn't have thistles, there wouldn't be a problem. Hard water. Does hard water affect the sprays? Yes, hard water can affect lots of sprays. And the more water you use, the greater effect it can have on the spray. Look, some products like Pastor Trio and Envy will be less affected, but look, 4-Front-T can be affected by hard water. So in those situations, we would recommend to use a product like Exchange. So what that does, it binds to the calcium in the water. locks up that calcium and stops that calcium and cations affecting the ingredient before it gets a chance to get to the plant. Roundup can be affected too by hard water. So you'd see lots of situations where you're using high water volume and using Roundup, that it can be affected and can lock up the ingredient and not make it available to kill out that weed. A couple of other questions about mixing Docstar with Thistlex. I suppose somebody wants to control docks and thistles. Yeah, there's no issue there. If you look back at the old Pastor, straight Pastor Pro that was on the market a number of years ago, that was a combination of both those ingredients. So generally, there's no issue at all. People would use Docstar Pro at 1 litre per hectare, and they would often mix in a half rate of Thistlex as well. So it's each pack doing 5 acres. And I suppose the added benefit is it's a clean up. It'll do a good job on docks. It'll also do a reasonable job on nettles and also do a reasonable job on thistles, even at the half rate. Now, if you had a severe infestation of thistles, you would need to increase that. But using both those products is at a half rate each is a good option for cleaning up silage ground where you don't want to be using forefront T and you want to cover a wide range of weeds. People with another question here. Would you mix or can you mix forefront T and MCPA? I'm presuming they're talking about including MCPA for the control of rushes, because there wouldn't be any need to use MCPA for any other reason, because forefront T does quite a good job on all that. Look, I suppose the issue that we want to be careful of there is when your control of docks and the infestation of docks. If you're chasing docks and good control of docks, we don't like the inclusion of hormone chemicals in there. And the reason is because the MCPA will get into the plant quicker and it could damage the leaves of the plant and prevent some of the forefront T ingredient getting down to kill out that root. So if you weren't so worried about long-term control of docks, yes, you could mix them, but we would probably advise to keep them separate if you can. Do a bit on ragwort. 1 or 2 questions there on ragwort. I have a slide or 2 on ragwort, which we've time for. Still another 15 minutes to go, and then I can answer them questions. Ragwort. Look, it's a very common weed, and in the last couple of years, it's become more and more widespread. You would see it on lots of the sides of roads, tends to be in rough grazing as well, or certainly areas where horses are grazing the field tight. It can be quite bad. Obviously, pulling ragwort does quite a good job and eliminates it if you can get rid of all the root fragments. However, it can be quite tedious if you have a large amount of ragwort in situ. In those situations, you're going to have to go and choose a herbicide. And I suppose the herbicides that are on the market is forefront T or straight 2,4-D. It's really important to spray the ragwort at the rosette stage, early on and in the springtime. So sort of now, over the next couple of weeks, is the ideal time to get it. You do need warm conditions, like we're having these couple of days, would be ideal. There's good growth. It's really, really important. You want to avoid spraying ragwort when it starts to produce a stem and get strong. And there's 2 reasons. Number 1, the chemicals are less effective when it gets strong and stemmy. And number 2, it takes longer for the weed to die. We all know that as ragwort is dying or gets sprayed with a chemical and begins to die, it becomes more palatable, gets sweeter, and the animals will eat it, and it can become poisonous then to them animals. So in a situation like this, when you spray this particular plant, which is starting to get stemmy, about 1 foot high, it could take at least 6 or 8 weeks for that ragwort to totally die and decay and be gone away. And it needs to be totally gone before you let the animals back in. We'd avoid using herbicides at that case. And it's a certain no-no when you see the flowers being emerged or you're seeing a real stemmy, you do not use herbicide. They will be very less effective at that stage. So you must ensure that the plant is actively growing and temperatures, including the soil temperature, are high, which we're getting at now. You'd avoid spraying ragwort or targeting ragwort early in March. That's one weed that you certainly would not use at that stage. Autumn applications can be very effective too. So you get into September or October time, if you get very mild autumns, the herbicides work quite well. Even into November, it can work well if we haven't had any frost and it's quite mild. And in those situations, you are less worried about stock getting back into the field, because you could close a paddock off in October, you could spray over ragwort, and then that field may not be grazed again until the following springtime. And it allows you time allows time for the ragwort to get totally dead and decayed. As I mentioned, the chemicals, aminopyrrolid is really good active, 4-Front-T. That's probably the best active out there on the market for killing ragwort. But 2,4-D does work quite well. It's quite cheap, cost effective, and it will work quite well. MCPA to a lesser extent, but there is formulations of the two products, and it will work on ragwort if you're targeting ragwort on its own. And remember, as I mentioned, actively grown rosettes is crucially important. Questions on ragwort? So I think that covers some of the questions that were there. There's one: if ragwort is sprayed at the right stage in good temperatures, how quick could you really get in to graze it? Look, at if there were rosettes there, if they're small, only 2 or 3 inches, you could be back in within 3 weeks. But if they're big rosettes, the size of a plate, you could be looking at 4 weeks, 5 weeks. It really depends. You do have to be careful and watch that situation. And look, it depends how many ragworts are there. If there's only 1 or 2 in this situation, a few ragworts, and there's lots of animals getting in, there's probably no effect. But if you have a small amount of animals and there's lots and lots of ragwort, you do need to wait this totally dead and decayed. Minimum 3 weeks it will take. What would be the lowest temperature you could spray 4-Front at? Look, I suppose temperatures, you do want to be spraying products when they're 9, 10 degrees. Really, you're looking for the weeds to be actively growing. So you'd be thinking from now on, once you get into April time, they will work well in most temperatures. If there is frost at night, you'd wait maybe till 10 or 11 o'clock in the day till the frost has gone, the weeds are actively growing, and then you could spray them. You would avoid, I suppose, spraying when there's really hard frost at night. And one of the reasons is because the frost is going to do damage to the ducks, and it's going to reduce the activity of the ducks. If that's the weed you're after, then you're going to get less control. If cattle break into a field that's sprayed less than 7 days, what would happen? As we mentioned, the grazing interval is 7 days. However, we have no known effects, so there wouldn't be an issue. You would try, if the cattle broke in, there probably wouldn't be an issue at all. You would try and remove the animals as soon as you can and allow it 7 days before you put them back into it. But there wouldn't really be an issue there in terms of an effect on the animal. So you'd be safe enough. Just 1 or 2 questions on clover, I suppose, before I finish up. As I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, most of the Corteva products will kill clover, and there has been a withdrawal of a number of products on the market last year, like Clovamex and Legamex DB under Sown DB, and those products are on the market. There is talk maybe they'll get an emergency approval and they'll come back, but it's difficult to know how much stock will be available. So what does a farmer do in that situation? He wants to establish clover, and there's no way of controlling the weeds in the clover. Look, I suppose the question is, I suppose lots of times grass seeds will include clover in it anyway, so he might decide to include the clover at the time of sowing, sow the grass, and then if the weeds come up, then he's got to decide how bad of a weed infestation is there. How much clover is actually there? In lots of situations, the Chagas talk about you needing a minimum of 30% clover. So I suppose in an established situation, you'll wonder how much clover is actually there. Is it worth keeping it at all? Or is the weeds going to take more from the grass yield than what the benefit of the clover is? And then in a new sown ley, obviously the clover is only getting established and a guy wants to establish it. If he has docks and thistles, he's better to eliminate those weeds because you will no way of controlling those in established ground. Much, much difficult to eliminate those. So what we recommend is you could spot spray with a product if the herbicides, if the weeds are not too bad. So you could go in with Grassland Pro and spot spray, or you could patch spray. You turn on and off a quad sprayer or a tractor sprayer in the areas where weeds are bad. Or you could go and spray with Pastor Trio, eliminate the clover, and incorporate it afterwards. And this work has been done by Chagas. You generally would do it either after first cut silage in established grassland, or in a new sown ley. What you would do is you go in and you graze tightly. You would spray your weeds. You go in maybe 7 to 10 days later and spray tightly or graze tightly. You'd obviously graze that once or twice to allow the 3-month time period between the application of the herbicide and your pasture and your incorporation of the clover. So at that stage, you graze it tightly. You go in with 2 kilos of clover per hectare. It's important maybe to mix it with something like 0.730, and that's because it's difficult to apply 2 kilos of clover on an acre, maybe with a fertilizer spreader. So you put in a bag of fertilizer, mix the clover in, makes it a little bit easier to spread it. The clover seed doesn't travel that far, so it's important to keep your tramline width quite narrow. You go 2 runs up and down the field, and also at 90 degrees to each other to ensure you're getting good coverage. People talk about putting slurry on afterwards. Look, watery slurry works well, or even a heavy rain shower, if it was coming afterwards, works well. Really what you're trying to do is get that clover seed to touch the soil. And once the clover touches the soil, it will germinate. It does not need to be harrowed in. It does not need to be rolled afterwards. Do not apply any nitrogen. Allow the clover time to establish. But it's important to get back in and graze the grass at regular intervals, and don't let the grass get quite thick and heavy. Don't allow the grass grow 8-10 inches high with maybe covers of 2,000 kilos on them before you graze it. Get in and graze lightly and graze regularly. It allows light down and allows the clover to get established afterwards. And that does work quite well. So that's really the only option for farmers going forward where there is no clover safe herbicides available. And hopefully in 2 years' time, there will be some new clover safe products on the market that they can use. We're just coming to the end there now. I suppose the one final question, which is, does spraying silage ground 3 to 4 weeks before grass, does spraying silage ground 3 to 4 weeks before cutting stunt the grass? Generally it doesn't. Spraying with a product like Docstar Pro 3 to 4 weeks before silage cut does not stunt the grass. As I mentioned, most of these products have been well tested and they be safe on the grass. So certainly a half rate of Docstar used in early May, 3 weeks before silage, will not stunt the grass. However, it's probably better to be targeting those weeds sooner rather than later. So the earlier you can get out now on the next couple of weeks, eliminate those weeds, and then allow grass to grow in its place. You know, if you spray the weeds 2 weeks before silage cutting, you don't allow time for that grass to thicken out and grow. So that's probably the first job that's going to be done with lots of people over the next couple of weeks, is getting out, spraying that silage ground. So it's important to get it early, eliminate the weeds, and allow grass to grow in its place. Look, that's everything. We're just coming up to 11 minutes past 11 now. I just want to thank everybody for tuning in today. It's really much appreciated. It's our first Grassland webinar we've done. Hopefully next year we'll be able to get out and be able to see you all in person and have a meeting. I will be recording this, as I say, it's been recorded and it will be available, and I will share the link with you afterwards over the next day or two. We've also emailed out lots of the leaflets and literature that's available. If anyone hasn't got that, please let us know and we can send that out to you. There's no problem at all. Our reps are getting out and about from time to time and dropping in some leaflets if needed into places. So if anyone needs any information or any literature or merchandising information, please let us know. We can either post it out or get it out to you over the next couple of weeks. There's no problem that way. Even in some Teagasc offices, if you want some information or leaflets on individual products, you want them posted out, there's no problem at all. Or we can certainly email you out some more of the electronic leaflets. They are also available on the Corteva website, corteva.ie, and they can be downloaded from there. And also Corteva have a Grassland app. That's on the last slide I have there. It's been updated at the moment, and there will be a new update in the next couple of weeks. And that is quite useful, and lots of people use it. Has information on all the products, has information on the timings and when best to use them. It has information on all the weeds and the best time to kill those weeds. You know, spray intervals, all that information is there about it. That can be downloaded by advisors and merchants, but it also can be downloaded by farmers too, and it can be quite useful. There is plans also to incorporate some calibration information into it, which helps the farmer then get some information with regard to the calibration of the sprayer and how best to use the products. So there's lots of information there on that app. It's available in the App Store, and there is a desktop version available too. And that information is on all the leaflets. So thanks very much, everybody. And hopefully we'll be in touch again over the next couple of months. Bye now.